Gonzaga's trio of transfers have all signed, so how will Mark Few manage this team's starting lineup and rotation next season?
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Wednesday and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Well, folks, Jalen Suggs was named an All-NBA defensive second-teamer. We're going to talk about that, whether Chet Holmgren was snubbed after getting some votes, but not ending up on either of the teams. We got that. We got some fun talking about some former Zags as well, but we are leading off today's show talking about what Gonzaga's lineup and rotation might look like next season. And it's a topic that we've talked about throughout the offseason periodically when we talk about new additions, potential new additions in the transfer portal, incoming guys coming in, what's happening with Michael Ajayi. We kind of are always continuing to have at least some level of a conversation about who's going to be in the rotation, who's going to start, what this might look like. But I figured today, without there being any breaking news, that we could just kind of take a step back and take a look at, okay, the dust has settled. The roster is almost 100% set. And we're going to take a look at what this lineup and rotation is probably going to look like for Mark Few's team with Michael Ajayi, and we're also going to talk about it without Michael Ajayi. For those of you who listened to Monday's episode, we talked about whether Michael Ajayi is going to stay in the NBA draft process, whether he is going to return to school, in which case he would come to Gonzaga. There is no opportunity for Ajayi to re-enter the transfer portal. He has signed his commitment to Gonzaga. If he is not playing at Gonzaga next year, he is playing in the professional ranks. It is one or the other. Everybody else is locked in for Gonzaga right now. So I want to kind of take a look at that. As I'm recording this right now, we have 7 days until we know whether Michael Ajayi is going to stay in the draft process or not. He has until May 29th to make his mind up. And again, we talked about it a little bit on Monday, but I'll reiterate. He had an impressive performance at the Combine. Michael Ajayi, he had a 7-foot wingspan for his height. That's tremendous. Showed some quality athleticism, displayed good three-point shooting skills, some distribution skills in the scrimmages, had some positive performances, but it didn't really felt like it dramatically moved the needle for his draft stock. And the general consensus is that Ajayi is going to return to school and he's going to come to Gonzaga. It's kind of been the consensus throughout this process, and it hasn't really changed. It's still not foolproof. It's still not 100%. We don't know exactly what's going on in Michael Ajayi's mind, and we don't know all the conversations that are being had. It just takes one team to say, hey, we really like you. And if we got a pick here in the second round and we think, you're the guy we're targeting at that spot, that may be all it takes for him to say, you know what, I'm willing to risk it. I'm going to stay in the draft process. So we really don't know. I will continue to reiterate that I believe he's going to be in Spokane next season. But I just want to clarify that the roster is set outside of that. There's also the Braden Smith factor, what we talked about on Tuesday's show. The general belief is that if Braden Smith does commit to Gonzaga, that there is a possibility that he would redshirt next season. Then he would have 2 years of eligibility remaining after that to replace Ryan Nembhard as Gonzaga's starting point guard, because Nembhard and Hickman and Khalif Battle are all about to play their final season of eligibility in college basketball. So right now, I'm not including Braden Smith in the mix, because even if he does commit to Gonzaga, it's generally believed that he will redshirt for this upcoming season. If he does not, he would be in the mix for some of the playing time towards the end of the bench, but I don't think that he would play. I don't realistically see an outcome where Braden Smith comes to Gonzaga unless he is willing to do that redshirt. So for all intents and purposes, he's kind of out of that picture for right now. So here is how I am projecting a starting lineup and a basic minutes per game distribution for the Gonzaga Bulldogs next season if Michael Ajayi is in a Gonzaga uniform. The starting lineup, been saying it all along, we're going to continue to stay it. Ryan Nembhard, Nolan Hickman, Michael Ajayi, Ben Gregg, Graham Ike. That feels to me very, very, very likely to be Gonzaga's starting lineup next season. Again, with the assumption that Ajayi is in the mix. I would be very surprised if Ajayi does not start. I think he is a logical fit as a small forward, as kind of a four hybrid. I think Gonzaga will play a lot of 3-guard lineups. I think if Ajayi is the starting 3, you will also see him play a lot of the 4 with Khalif Battle in the mix alongside Nembhard and Hickman. I don't think that Nembhard and Hickman's minutes are going to drop very much at all. They each averaged about 35 minutes per game last year. In this projection, I have them both averaging 32 minutes per game. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if it's more than that. Mark Few loves to ride his guards. These two dudes played pretty much every minute last year, and a lot of it was necessity last year, especially when Luka Krajinovic was hurt. This team just did not have a third guard. And I know there were opportunities, there were games where Mark Few wished he could have given those guys a break. They played all 40 minutes against UW. They played all 40 minutes in a lot of Gonzaga's other really big-time games early in the year. But I think the assumption that they're going to just ratchet back their minutes in a big way, I'm not buying that. I have both Nembhard and Hickman still playing 32 minutes a game next season with Ajayi in the mix, him at the small forward. I got him playing about 27 minutes per game. He was one of the tougher players to project because I'm just not sure exactly how he's going to be utilized. I expect a lot of minutes at the 3 and a fair amount of minutes at the 4. I have Ben Gregg at 25 minutes per game at the power forward, and then Graham Ike at 26 minutes as the starting center. I think I'd like to see Ike play more, but he played about 25 and a half minutes per game last year. And that's because there were a lot of games where he got in early foul trouble and had to sit the entire rest of the first half. Didn't have to, but that's the way Mark Few has always operated with his team. So I think we're going to see games where Ike plays 32, 33, 35 minutes per game. We're also going to see games where Ike plays 19 minutes because he got in foul trouble. And then they didn't need him in the second half because Braden Huff went off and they just were like, okay, we're good with what we got. So I think he's going to average around that 25, 26 minutes a game. Coming off the bench, Khalif Battle, I have him at 21 minutes per game. And again, that's in a situation with Michael Ajayi. Without Michael Ajayi, he's the biggest benefactor in terms of playing time. 21 minutes per game feels kind of low for Khalif Battle, but it's hard to see it being a lot more than that just with the rest of the personnel on this roster. Braden Huff comes in at number 7. I got him at 14 minutes per game. That's literally 40 minutes between Huff and Ike. To me, it just feels like those two guys are your centers. There's going to be very few minutes where there's not one of those two guys on the floor, but there's going to be very few, if any, minutes where they're both on the floor. So I think them splitting that playing time is what makes the most sense to me. I have Dusty Stromer coming in at 12 minutes per game, and then Steele Venters coming in behind him at 8 minutes per game. If Steele Venters were to average 8 minutes per game, this would be the first time in a while Gonzaga is really truly playing a 9-man rotation, where you actually have somebody playing consistently. 8 minutes per game is not a lot, but that's enough to be like, well, it's not just garbage time. He's actually a part of the rotation, a small part, but a part of it. After that, at number 10 and 11 is Emmanuel Innocenti and Junsook Yo. I have them at 2 and 1 minute, respectively, basically just garbage time. Just garbage time. There's not a lot of opportunities. That all equals 200 minutes, 5 guys, 40 minutes per game. 200 minutes. That's the way that you got to figure out the math here. And there's just not a lot of extra minutes for those guys. So they're going to average a few minutes per game in garbage time. Obviously, the walk-ons will have, a handful of games that they play as well. Kate Orness, Joe Few, Q, Joaquin Reyes more. Like there's going to be in the mix a little bit as well. But by and large, this is how I expect the minutes to more or less shake out next season. And then a potential lineup without Michael Ajayi. It doesn't change for a lot of guys. I have Nembhard and Hickman each bumping up a little bit. I think they'd play a little bit more minutes. Khalif Battle would be the primary beneficiary. I have him sliding into the starting lineup, and I don't think that that's guaranteed. If Michael Ajayi does not come to Gonzaga, I think it's possible Dusty Stromer starts. I think it's possible Steele Venters starts if he's 100% healthy. I think it's less likely that Emmanuel Innocenti starts, although he could realistically fit into a bigger role. But Battle's the best player out of that group, and I think the most likely to step into that starting lineup, even though I think he's a natural fit as a reserve guard for this team. Ben Gregg bumps up to 28 minutes per game. I have Ike and Huff sticking with their 26 and 14. Stromer gets a huge bump from 12 minutes to 20 minutes per game, 8 more minutes per game in my estimation here, if Michael Ajayi does not fit or does not stay in Spokane. Steele Venters goes from 8 minutes to 12 minutes, so he gets a bump as well. Emmanuel Innocenti bumps up to being just kind of in and out of that rotation. I have him at 5 minutes per game as that kind of pseudo ninth guy. I still think Gonzaga would probably play a hard 8 if they didn't have Michael Ajayi in the mix. I think that Innocenti would still kind of be out of the rotation, but we'd see more minutes from him, certainly if there was guards in foul trouble, if there were situations where they just needed another body out there. I could see him climbing kind of more into that lineup. And then Yo's still just primarily garbage time for him. So we'll kind of revisit this. Certainly in a week when we know whether Michael Ajayi is coming to Gonzaga or not, we'll kind of take a look at what this might look like. But that's generally the consensus projection right now. And it's hard to see Mark Few and the Zags playing a full 9 because they just haven't done it a lot historically. But this is a tough team to kind of leave guys out of. So I think we are going to see a little bit more of a 9-man rotation than we've historically seen, particularly if Ajayi's on campus, but it's still going to mostly be 8 guys, I think. Well, folks, the basketball tournament is back, and sadly, Gonzaga did not put together an alumni team, but we're going to talk about what would it look like if they did. And that's coming up right after a word from today's sponsor, eBay Motors. Folks, passion, drive, patience. That's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what helps keep your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits to LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. Plus, with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your car every time, or you get your money back, because with eBay Motors, folks, you're burning rubber, not cash. So with all the parts you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that W. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, and eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, folks, still Andy Patton, still locked on Zags. Moving on to segment 2 here. Been kind of wanting to talk about this for a while. Thought this was a good opportunity to get this conversation out. The basketball tournament is back. TBT. It is in its 11th season. I cannot believe that the basketball tournament has been around for 11 seasons. For those of you who are unfamiliar, new to this concept, it is a 64-team tournament that takes place every college basketball and NBA offseason. And it's basically any team is invited. Anybody can create a team. Again, there's 64 of them. There's 8 different regions where these games take place, and they make a big bracket, and the team that wins gets $1 million. Fundamentally, it is that simple. Make a team, join the tournament, win, you get $1 million. What has happened is that the majority of teams, not all of them, but a good chunk of teams are alumni base from certain programs. Like UConn has a team, Purdue has a team, Dayton has a team, Boise State has a team, Colorado State has a team, et cetera, et cetera. And they're not all like, they're not, it's not a rule. Anybody can join any team. So the roster for Boise State guys and UConn guys is not all players who exclusively played at those programs or even played there at all. Some guys just didn't actually play at those schools, but you see a lot of kind of themed teams. And like Floyd Mayweather owns a team, and then there's like Shaquille O'Neal's talking about potentially owning a team. Like you buy a team, you buy some players, you bring it out, you try to win $1 million. That's effectively what it is. And a long time ago, Gonzaga had a team. And at the time, like Blake Stepp played. I think Dan Dickau might have played. A lot of older Gonzaga alumni played. Matt Bolton played. They didn't do all that well when they played back then. But Gonzaga hasn't had a team since then. They haven't had an affiliation. I don't know if they just haven't. Nobody stepped up to actually try to lead a team, to put something together, what it might look like, why it hasn't happened. We've seen former Zags play on other teams. Josh Perkins played a few years ago. Ryan Woolridge has played in the past. Like there are former Zags who have participated in the basketball tournament. There just hasn't been a Gonzaga specific team put together since, I think it's been 9, maybe even 10 years since this happened. And we're in the 11th year. It was very, very early on when Gonzaga had a team, and they haven't done it in a while. But I thought it might be fun to kind of look at what that might look like. And it also gives us an opportunity to talk about some former Zags. To remember some guys. It's always a fun thing to do, especially in the offseason, just talk about some former Gonzaga players, what this might look like. So I try to put together players at each position that could conceivably do this. Guys who are still playing professionally overseas, or who just recently finished their career, who are still, able to get out there and play, who are healthy, things like that. And I put together a list of guys at each position, and then my dream team that I think is realistic to potentially participate in this event. And then like a let's get nuts kind of dream team as well. It's not going to be Chet Holmgren and Jalen Suggs and Corey Kispert, because those guys are in the NBA and they're not going to be doing this, but it's fun to kind of look at some of the guys who might be able to do this. So the point guard position, understandably, completely stacked. You could have Josh Perkins, who's been having a very prolific career. I think Josh Perkins has played in like 9 or 10 different countries in his basketball playing career. He has been all over the place. You could have Nigel Williams-Goss, who is playing right now in the EuroLeague with Filip Petrusev. They are teammates. Playing for Olympiacos. Really exciting to see them having that kind of success. A couple G League guys. David Stockton's been playing in the G League. Ryan Woolridge. I think he's overseas now, but I know he was playing in the G League as recently as last year. Jeremy Pargo, I think, would be one of the first calls that would be made, because that man loves playing ball. He loves playing ball. He's been doing it for so freaking long, and he loves doing it, and he would join this team in a heartbeat. Gino Crandall has had a massive amount of success professionally since leaving Gonzaga. He's played in Britain. He was a back-to-back MVP in the British Basketball League. He's playing currently in Germany and having a lot of success there. Looking at the off-guard role, Rasir Bolton was just an MVP candidate in his first professional season overseas. Silas Melson has had a very productive professional basketball playing career as well. Malachi Smith just finished up a great season in the G League, played for the Rip City Remix for a while, also played for the Wisconsin team, the Wisconsin Herd, the team that Drew Timme has been on as well. Joel Ajayi is playing professionally in France after a brief time in the NBA and in the G League. He never quite stuck. Admon Gilder finished up a season playing for the G League Ignite. I believe he was playing in Canada before he joined the G League Ignite. I think now he's playing back in France or somewhere overseas. Small forward position's a little tougher. If Gonzaga conceivably put a team together, I think that they would have a 3-guard lineup, but a couple transfers who played for Gonzaga, Byron Wesley or Jordan Matthews, could kind of step into that role. Jordan Matthews is still playing professionally. I think Wesley has ended his career, but I know Matthews is still playing. Brian Alberts is also still playing as well, a bit player for Gonzaga before he transferred to Long Beach State for a couple of years. On the front court, Kyle Wiltjer just finished his career or his season in Turkey. He was the 6th man candidate for them out there. I think it was in Turkey. Jeremy Jones, another guy who's had a very productive career. He's been playing in in Japan. Him and Jonathan Williams have both been playing in Japan with the same team. I think they could both be options for the Zags as well. I have Jonathan Williams listed as a center. And then Drew Timme. I don't think Drew Timme would do this. I think he's too, especially, he's hurt right now. And we see him rehabbing. If you're following him on Instagram, he's posting videos. He's getting ready. He's kind of ramping back up to be ready for Summer League in the next season. But the timing doesn't really work out for him, unfortunately. If I were putting a team together that I would want to see in the basketball tournament, I would probably go Josh Perkins at the 1, Nigel Williams-Goss at the 2. Look, it worked in 2017 when this team went to the national championship. Why not throw it together here to try to win $1 million in the basketball tournament? Perkins, Williams-Goss in the backcourt. I'd said it'd be a 3-guard lineup, so give me Rasir Bolton starting at the 3. You're a little undersized, but wow, this floor spacing that you have with Perkins, Williams-Goss, and Rasir Bolton, and Kyle Wiltjer. I'm throwing Kyle Wiltjer at the 4. I think he's an obvious pick for this team. He's been really good as a professional basketball player, a guy who never stuck in the NBA just because of athleticism concerns and defense, but he's a tremendous scorer, tremendous three-point shooter, tremendous basketball player. Would be a really fun fit in a tournament like this. Give me Jonathan Williams at the 5 as well. Give me Pargo, Gino Crandall, and Jeremy Jones coming off the bench. That 8-player team right there, they got a great chance. There's going to be some really good teams in this tournament, some like kind of all-star teams that get put together. But that 8-man lineup right there, if they were all there, I think that team's got a shot to win $1 million and win it all. And then my dream team, it's pretty similar, but I'm going to toss in Joel Ajayi as well. I'm also going to toss in Killian Tilly. Those two guys I don't think would do it. Tilly is around in the United States right now. He's in Spokane. He's been in Spokane. He's also been in France. He's kind of been back and forth. I know he did an interview with Dan Dickow on the Fan Nation podcast talking about being back in Spokane. His fiance is here. So maybe he would step in and do it. If he's healthy, that's a really great player to have on that roster. And if we're doing the let's get nuts dream team, definitely give me Drew Timme. Drew Timme, Killian Tilly, Joel Ajayi, Rasir Bolton, Nigel Williams-Goss. Wow, that team is going to absolutely kill it. I'm going to keep, when the rosters come out, most of the rosters are not done yet. This thing's still a few weeks away. When the rosters come out, we're going to take a look through them. Going to spend an afternoon doing this because it's going to be fun. Find out if there are any former Zags who are participating, and we'll talk about it. Hopefully someday. I'm not going to fund it, but hopefully someday there is a Gonzaga alumni team back in the basketball tournament, because I think it'd be really fun to get a chance to see some former Zags playing together in action during this event. Well, folks, Jalen Suggs was named an all-NBA defensive second teamer, but was Chet Holmgren snubbed? We got more coming up on that in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Eddie Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. Closing out the show, talked about some Zags in the NBA updates. Jalen Suggs was named to the All-NBA defensive second team. Your first team was a group of bigs: Rudy Gobert, who was your defensive player of the year, Victor Wembanyama, a couple of French big men right there, Bam Adebayo from the Miami Heat, Herb Jones, and Anthony Davis. That was your all defensive first team. Your second team, much more guard friendly on this one. You had Jalen Suggs, of course. You also had Alex Caruso from the Chicago Bulls, Derek White from the Boston Celtics, former Washington Husky Jaden McDaniels, and then Drew Holiday rounding out your second team. Jalen Suggs finished this season. He was much more productive offensively than he's ever been in his career. Obviously, that shouldn't factor in to getting named to the all-defensive team, although I think that the more productive you are in general, the more it helps you get attention for awards like these. But Suggs did finish the season with 1.4 steals per game, as well as 0.6 blocks per game. He's not here because of his shot blocking, although he is here in part because of his ability to pick pockets. His 106 steals on the season was 10th in the NBA. His 1.4 steals per game was 9th, but also his steal rate, 2.6% steal rate, that was 4th in the entire NBA last year. The only three players ahead of him in steal rate were Alex Caruso, who was named to the second team, as well as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and De'Aaron Fox, a couple of Kentucky Wildcat guards right there. So phenomenal stuff from Suggs. 1.6 defensive box plus minus. That is 18th in the NBA, and his 110.4 defensive rating was 19th. So by most of the advanced metrics, at least on Basketball Reference, he was a top 20 defender in the country. That's enough to get you on the All-NBA second team, and it totally should be. Jalen Suggs is one of the best pick-and-roll defensive guards in the entire country. Synergy Sports has done some data on this. Basically, he is the best guard at navigating the pick-and-roll in the NBA. That is such a valuable skill to have. When Jalen Suggs was drafted, everybody wanted him to be a superstar potential guy. And what it is looking like right now is that he's going to develop into an All-NBA caliber defender and a good offensive player. He may not be a superstar. He may not be a consistent all-star starter, even an all-star reserve year in and year out. He's maybe not a future Hall of Famer. Those are sky-high expectations that it's probably unlikely he's going to match. But the kind of middle ground for him was always like a really good defensive player who contributes offensively. Last year, he was already that, and he's still very young. So for him to already be in that conversation as a Marcus Smart type defender who can contribute offensively, who shot close to 40% from three last year, huge stuff from Jalen Suggs. Love seeing that. Suggs was not the only player who got votes for the All-NBA teams last year. Chet Holmgren got 21 votes, all for the second team. He was the highest total vote getter who did not get a single first-place vote for the All-NBA teams, all defensive NBA teams, I should say. And part of it is that it's just rare for rookies. Rookies are very rarely all defensive first-teamers. Victor Wembanyama was, and he deserved it. He deserved it. And I think that voters didn't want to put two rookies on the All-NBA first team. So with Chet, they were like, we're not even going to give him, nobody even gave him first-place votes. They all gave him second-place votes. He only got 21 out of 100, I think 99 different voters. So a lot of people didn't have him on their ballot at all. And I think that's wrong. I think Chet should have been in this conversation. I think he probably should have been a second teamer. It's not like horribly egregious that he wasn't a second teamer, especially since he was the third highest vote getter who didn't make one of the top two teams. But his numbers were pretty darn good. And he does routinely get slept on a little bit because I think the advanced analytics indicate how much more impactful he is than you necessarily see with the eye test. Chet Holmgren last year was second in block percentage and fourth in contested shots per game. Basically, very few players in the NBA were better at contesting shots and blocking shots than Chet Holmgren. The guys in front of him, they're your first teamers. They're your Rudy Goberts, your Victor Wembanyama's, your Bam Adebayos. Chet Holmgren had the lowest field goal percentage against him in the restricted area of anybody in the NBA. Of all the players in the NBA, players shot the worst against Chet Holmgren when they were in the restricted area. That is an incredibly telling stat. And I saw people in the comments, there's a lot of arguments happening of like, oh, he gets pushed around by bigger centers. And it's like, the data doesn't really prove that. Like, you can watch highlights and occasionally see him get bodied. It happens. But the few times a game where a Yusuf Nurkic or a Nikola Jokic or somebody like that gets into his body and moves him around a little bit and scores, like, yeah, it happens. It happens to every big man. Rudy Gobert got scorched by Nikola Jokic a handful of times just in the recent playoff series, but Minnesota still won. But for Holmgren, effectively an entire season's worth of data indicated that there is nobody in the NBA who is better at preventing players from scoring in the restricted area than Chet Holmgren. Nobody. That's a pretty telling stat, wouldn't you say? That kind of doesn't go with the narrative that he gets pushed around by bigger centers. Again, it happens every once in a while. He's not holding players to 0% against him, but nobody held players to a better percentage than he did. He also helped lead Oklahoma City, the fourth best defensive team in the entire league. That wasn't just him. Lou Dort's a great defender. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, we mentioned, really high on the steal data as well. Jalen Williams is a super high-level athlete, but Chet Holmgren anchored a defense that finished fourth in the league as a rookie. He was a phenomenal defensive player, and he will be a first-team and second-team defensive player for many, many, many years, just didn't quite sneak into that conversation this year. So I want to mention Domantas Sabonis got a couple of votes. He got one first-place vote and two second-place votes for the All-NBA defensive teams. Domantas Sabonis got more first-team votes, than Chet Holmgren. That is baffling. And look, Domantas Sabonis led the league in rebounds. If you really count rebounding as a and Sabonis did most of his rebounding was defensive rebounds, not just offensive rebounds. If you count rebounding as a defensive statistic and you value it more than anything else, I can squint and kind of understand the argument for Domantas Sabonis getting first team love. But look, here's the deal. He's not a very good defender. Love Domantas Sabonis. Phenomenal offensive player, triple-double machine. Had an extraordinary season last year, played all 82 games. He's not a good defensive player. He's not good in space. He's not a particularly good rim protector. Watching Sacramento Kings basketball, you're not going to come away from watching 5, 10, even just 2 or 3 games of Domantas Sabonis and think, wow, that guy's one of the best defensive players in the league. You're just not going to think that. So it's a little bit silly that he got some votes. I'm not upset about it. I get it. He's a great rebounder. Love seeing Zags get some love, but it's a little bit questionable. I also want to shout out WCC legend Brandon Pajemski from Santa Clara, rookie last year for the Golden State Warriors. He received a second-place vote as well. Last thing to talk about today on the show, Connor Griffin named an assistant coach for the Brooklyn Nets. Griffin's a former Gonzaga walk-on. He played 88 minutes for Gonzaga across 2 seasons, was a big-time athlete, big dunking ability. He's had a fascinating career, and I'm going to wrap you through it here real quick. Griffin, again, 2 years at Gonzaga as a walk-on. He left Gonzaga to go walk on to the Washington football team and played tight end for them and made 1 catch in his career at the University of Washington in the 2015 Heart of Dallas Bowl. Only catch of his career came in a bowl game. Fun to see that. He was also a practice player for the Washington basketball team, which was led at the time by Lorenzo Romar. Griffin then transferred again. He went to Vanguard, which is an NAIA school in California, decided to go back to basketball, averaged 17 points and 7 boards, and was an all-GNAC player. Then he went to Pepperdine to get his graduate degree. He kind of followed Romar over there and became a video coordinator while he was at Pepperdine. Spent a couple years with the Waves getting his grad degree. Then he went on to get a job in the NBA with the Denver Nuggets as a video coordinator. Spent the last couple of years with the Denver Nuggets. He was helping with scouting. He was helping with player development. He was helping with draft preparations. He got an opportunity to be an assistant coach for Denver's summer league team last year. And because he had a previous relationship with Jordi Fernandez, who was the new head coach of the Brooklyn Nets, Fernandez had been an assistant coach for the Denver Nuggets, so they knew each other from that time period. Fernandez gets the head coaching job at Brooklyn, and now he's hiring Connor Griffin to come with him. After 3 years as a video coordinator, he's officially going to be an assistant coach at the NBA level. What an awesome opportunity for Connor Griffin. It continues a pipeline of Gonzaga walk-ons who go into coaching. And forgive me, I am not 100% sure if either Brian Michelson or Stephen Gentry were scholarship players or walk-on players at Gonzaga. I believe that they were walk-ons, but I'm not 100% sure. But of course, both are now on staff for Gonzaga. As coaches, Rem Bakamis has been working at Arizona as the director of player development, getting into the coaching world as well. Like, we have seen Gonzaga walk-ons step into coaching roles. It makes sense. You pursue players for those end of the bench roles who can kind of help you out in a variety of different ways. They're practice squad players, but if you're getting the right types of guys, and like Tommy Lloyd basically recruited Rem Bakamis to come to Gonzaga to walk on because his dad was a prolific high school basketball coach. Like, they kind of figured the coaching was sort of part of the deal there. So it's not like this is completely just like random or coincidental. The kind of players who are walk-ons for a program like Gonzaga tend to want to go into that coaching space. And we've seen it with B-Mike and Gentry. We've seen it with Rem, and now we're seeing it with Connor Griffin all the way at the NBA level. Huge congratulations to Griffin for getting this opportunity. Hopefully someday he continues to grow and become a head coach if that's what he wants to do, either in the NBA or perhaps back at the college level. It's going to wrap it up for us today here on the Locked On Zags podcast, folks. Thank you so much to those of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. We will be back this week with more of our season in review series, continuing to keep you up to date on the transfer portal, on Michael Ajayi's stay or go decision that's coming up, all of that coming up later this week. Thanks again, and until next time, as always, go Zags.